Oh, we are live before the schedule because I forgot to put the animation. Okay, hey. There we go. This is early one. Welcome everybody. This is 5 minutes before the schedule because I messed it up. And we have yet another Ask Us Anything session, which I probably should rename to Ask Us instead of me, if that's in the title. And now nobody is in the chat, and we're going to wait until... Okay, let me see whether I can play the animation. Yeah, here we go. Okay, now we're live for good, for real, not like the fake
Hello.
one last time. Hello, hello. This is me, Victor. This is Scott, answering your questions, and we're going to jump right into it. There are two parts of this question. First one, Scott, so bear with me. How would you go from GitOps approach with Git triggers Terraform pipelines to expose provisioning of resources via some IDP? And there is a follow-up. No, not that one. Here we go. Please explain how you will deal with it while keeping TF state and audit versioning ability of GitHub like in the first approach. I don't use Terraform. You're a Terraform user, Scott.
So I think that the same applies for Terraform as it would for Crossplane, as it would to anything else. The answer is that your IDP, or it depends what you define as an IDP. If I'm saying IDP as internal developer portal, as my interface above my platform, and let's say Backstage, for example, the best IDP framework out there, and then you were doing software templates, that should not be triggering Terraform. That should be pushing the code up to GitHub, and then you can use those same Git triggers to do what it's doing, or use Terraform Cloud or Terraform Enterprise that's going to do that, or Env0, or whatever it is that you're using that is going to do the actual work, should not be Backstage. It should not be your IDP. Your IDP should be storing things in Git, and then things should trigger from there, be that standardized GitOps tools like Flux CD, or if you have to, Argo CD, or, GitHub Action, something with Git triggers.
The only thing I will say, small correction, because I'm stickler for naming things correctly.
It's not
there
GitOps,
are four.
Doing...
Exactly. It does not make it bad. It's not necessarily a bad thing or anything like that. I'm not saying that. But GitOps, 4 rules. One of them, it's a pull-based mechanism. You don't trigger it, it pulls it. Whether that's a good thing or no, that's a separate conversation. Not GitOps.
Right.
Okay. How do you handle secrets when running Backstage locally? I suppose you need to test fetching the catalog and so on, so are secrets shared across the team? Let me give a quick one that is unrelated with Backstage, and then you go straight Backstage. I love using Teller, even though nobody's maintaining it for over a year. It's a project dead in the water. But basically, with Teller, I just have a file, and if I have permission, it goes to my secret store and converts things to whichever format I want. I tend to use environment variables heavily, right? Yeah. I don't know what you do with Backstage, Scott, though.
Yeah. So, in general, it's not a simple solution, right? It's going to change per organization. Typically, the recommendation that I make for these things is that if you're running it locally, like Yarn Dev, would be to use a tool like Teller as well, that is pulling in from Vault. So you can share a Teller file amongst the team that will pull down those credentials, and all of your app config YAML can have environment variables in there. You don't need to hard code credentials into your app config for Backstage. So I would do it that way. Basically have Teller just generate the end variables, pull them in from Vault or whatever other secret manager you're using, pull them down, have them as environment variables, and run from there. If you're more security conscious, then what I would do is just store the credentials for each developer in like their own path under Vault, and then they would just change the path within their Teller or whatever configuration to pull from the relevant location. But yeah, I mean, that just comes down to what level of security and auditability and all of that you need from that perspective.
Okay, we're on the same page, give or take. What do you think of OpenKruise and OpenKruise rollouts? Would like to see a video if you get the chance. I am not experienced with OpenKruise. I have it on my list for the video. I haven't used it enough. There was always something that left a bad taste in my mouth whenever I tried it, but I haven't dug into it, so I don't know.
Yeah,
do you have any experience?
I haven't really used it much either. I've heard interesting things, good and bad, about it. I just don't know enough to be able to say anything. The fact that it's incubating means something, I think, in the CNCF. I believe it's an incubation stage, but at the same point, I just don't have enough experience to give actual recommendations.
Wait, is OpenKruise part of the
OpenKruise
group
is
of two?
CNCF.
Yeah, exactly.
It's
there is Cruise roles.
incubating, even. It's CNCF incubating. So yeah.
No idea.
I can't believe it. It'll be. How is this not on You Choose, Victor?
Huh?
How is it not in the You Choose?
It's very complicated. So I put OpenKruise without knowing it in depth in a section that will be all about automation. We did not get to that part yet.
Okay.
But things overlap, so one could easily argue that it could be in, I don't know, IDP maybe section, or it's complicated to categorize things without going crazy.
Yeah.
Okay, we are considering migrating from emissary Ingress to another Ingress controller. What would you recommend? Emissary is the only one I never really, not the only one, but one of the few that I never really dug into. You? Yeah. Probably not.
I played with it and didn't see anything that I'm like, ooh, like I should, like, I didn't see the value add of it over like some other ingresses that made me like go like, ooh, I really need to go deep into this. My favorite from the Ingress world is Contour. My least favorite, but sometimes recommendation, is Nginx. And that's just because it's,
annotations.
Annotations. It has the most support for anything, though, in the world because of those annotations. But, I'm not a fan. I think Contour is the best Ingress controller in my mind. It's purely a question of, does it support what you need? Because they follow the Ingress spec to the letter in terms of even their HTTP proxy. It's for HTTP traffic. It's not going to do weird things that sometimes you want.
Now I remember why I never got warm, fuzzy feelings about emissary to give it a shot. I remember the documentation always nudges you towards not using Ingress. In the past, at least, kind of, oh yeah, Ingress, but how about this? And I always thought that we should figure out some sort of standard, and until then, use Ingress with annotations. That was my strategy in a way. Okay. From Jonathan, not sure if it was discussed before, but what's your approach to securing containers that workloads in Kubernetes? Now we need 2 hours.
Yeah. Which level of security are we talking about here is the real question, because I can give a short list of use a slim, secure base image, number one, right? So whether it's chain guard images or if it's an Alpine-based image, if you want to live in hell, right, and deal with Musel stuff instead of glibc.
It's better than Ubuntu image.
No, it isn't, because you run into such weird issues with Musel that, like,
fair enough.
Especially if you're in like the Java world, and then it's just absolutely terrifyingly bad.
Fair enough.
But like, and there are slim Ubuntus today. Like, you don't need Ubuntu base. Like, there's Ubuntu Slim that is already.
Oh, of course. I was referring to Ubuntu.
Yeah. Ubuntu base, when you just do Docker pull Ubuntu, yes, that is a bit large. You could use UBI from Red Hat, right? I mean, there's a lot of slimmer or Photon or whatever it is. You want a slim, secure base image. You want to validate. I think Kyverno is what we use, is what should be used for admission policies to validate things. For example, not running as root and things of that sort. I think you need some type of runtime protection in that world. I personally do not believe in cheaping out, and I believe that that is like the area where, if you can, you should be purchasing the enterprise solutions, whatever it is, because typically just the gap between what open source can do and what the actual like real proprietary things in that area can do are so much better. I think like policy management, personally, I don't see the value in buying a policy management solution on Kubernetes. Use Kyverno, it's awesome. But things like Aqua, Prisma, whatever, like I think that type stuff is worth it. For security perspectives and network policies, you should be using tools. If you aren't using Aqua or Prisma that can auto-generate network policies, use tools like I'm blanking, Inspector Gadget to auto-generate network policies to secure from a networking perspective.
You know, the thing I like about your answer, and I'm on the same page, is that you started with tools or processes that are not necessarily viewed as security related, right? Usually people start by answering that question. Oh, scanning. Oh, I don't know, this or that. And to me, what you said is the right approach. Kind of like, why do you want to, instead of detecting vulnerabilities, why don't you just remove most of them by using a slim image, right?
And then, yes, you need to detect vulnerabilities still, but you're going to be detecting 100 instead of 20,000.
Exactly. Kind of. But people usually start the opposite direction, kind of, oh, let me detect all the vulnerabilities, kind of, and then let's fix them. And then once we fix them, let's talk about whatever you Scott, are proposing, which is just right. Silly. The only thing I would add, and this is cliche, going to be use GitOps. And the reason why I'm saying that, just lock that cluster. Okay. Kind of lock it. No access to the cluster is one of the easiest way to secure a cluster, right?
Yeah.
Okay, next one. You probably can pronounce this name. Sounds like your neighborhood. I have been working. What did you say?
I don't know how to pronounce that. Niphon? I don't know.
I have been working on Kubernetes manifest testing tool that hosts the local Git repository into a kind cluster. Bootstraps Flux and then reconciles the charge customization Timoni bundle on every commit. Okay, this wasn't... Okay, no, there is more. If you think that would be useful, what would make it a no-go or must-use tool? No-go, I don't know. I mean, I'm not very, to be honest, and this is going to sound negative, Niphon. I don't have very warm feelings towards tools that provision stuff, mostly because that's the least of the problems, right? Kind of like, how do you install stuff? That's very valuable and very useful, but the real problem comes afterwards when stuff breaks, kind of.
Right.
But what would be a must tool? Scott mentioned one of those, policies. Definitely must tool, right? One of the first ones to put there.
Yeah, I don't know. And me personally, I'm not a fan of running things locally that are my dependencies. I get like the value in it. And when I have like a, 10-hour flight or things like that, like, so I'll spin up, a Git server locally so I can tell but it's like the truth of the matter is with any of these things, if I start using that locally, it's just a bit different than how GitHub works. And it's going to be a bit different than how GitLab works. And my flow is not going to be the same there as it is when I'm using actual providers, which is why I prefer to use actual like shared providers outside. I like my laptop being something that I just destroy anything that's running on it and don't care. At which point, why do I care really about having a Git solution locally? Personally, like for my use cases, I know a lot of people that like having that, fully isolated environment. Me personally, I like depending on external things because I like getting as close I can to dev prod parity.
Yeah. And especially if that thing is like GitHub, if GitHub goes down or stops operating one day, we're going to have much bigger problems than my development environment. Kind of literally the whole world depends on it.
And when I'm working locally, kubectl apply. Like I don't have any issues with that when I'm working in a local kind cluster. I don't want to do GitOps to that. I want to do GitOps in remote clusters. Locally, I want just quick, dirty, and fast.
Okay. From Nikos, I'm using Teratest to validate Helm values for production. Runs in actions, knows any better way tool. Assuming that I understood what you're doing, I tend to use Chainsaw, Kyverno Chainsaw for any type of testing. That is... have you used Teratest? I haven't even used Teratest. I remember that I saw it, but I never got to use it.
I haven't, because I try to stay as far away as I can from Helm. So if that's a Helm tool, then there's a reason that I don't know it, because I like to not admit the existence of Helm. That's a whole other story.
We're on the same page there. But that's also one of the reasons why I like Chainsaw, is that I really don't care whether it's Helm or Customize or YTT or whatever it is. What I'm really testing is it creating the deployment that it needs to create? Is it creating the, I don't know, service or whatever you're creating, right? Kind of testing the result, not the values. Because if you just test the values, I'm not sure what will you get, right? Oh, it's string instead of integer.
Right. It's like, yes, do I believe that you should be doing Helm lint and like those things using the linting plugins and stuff from Helm itself? Yes, like that's great. I think that any Helm chart that doesn't have a schema in it today is dumb now that they've added schema support in Helm. I think there are certain things in that area that just should be done if you are using Helm and haven't left that bandwagon yet. But Chainsaw is the #1 tool for testing in Kubernetes. Never use Cuddle anymore. It's dead. Just use Chainsaw.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Chainsaw is effectively, it started like
it was just like a replace, like
Cuddle.
an in-place replacement of Cuddle, and because it works with the Cuddle configurations still, if I remember.
Yeah, so you can if you have Cuddle, you can move the definitions manifest into run it with Chainsaw, and it will just work, right? Eventually, we'll probably figure out that there are better ways to do it
with the
and might
Chainsaw configuration itself. But
yeah. And by the way, Cuddle, unless something changed recently, Cuddle is not maintained for a long time now.
Yeah, it's like Teller.
Yeah. Except that, there is one significant difference. I'm very disappointed that Teller is not maintained anymore, but it's still doing everything that I needed to do.
Right.
Unlike Cuddle that never did everything I needed to do. It was just the only tool of that kind.
Exactly. So, like Schema Hero.
You read my mind, man. I'm really, Caro. Schema Hero is the same example. It's not good, but it's the only one.
Until Atlas came around.
Until Atlas came around, right? And we say only one that is designed to be, let's call it Kubernetes native. You could run Fly.io, or not Fly.io, but Fly, the DB into as I don't know, sidecar or something.
Job or an init container, but yeah, Kubernetes native, it's Schema Hero or Atlas.
So far we agreed on everything, and I suspect that we are going to disagree on this one. I don't like DevContainers. And the reason why I don't like it is that they give me the same result as what I have locally. And I don't need remote container to have a CLI that I need.
And that's where I completely disagree. I love DevContainers. I think that one of the biggest challenges working in different like open source projects and all of that, if you're not, the amount of time it takes sometimes to set up the different dependencies and the right versions and to make sure that everyone's using the correct versions. And you have all the issues of, the Apple fanboys out there Yeah, how about all the Apple fanboys out there that use ARM processors today? And, but you also have people that use x86 architectures, and then everything starts to be a little weird, and it works here, but it doesn't work here, and this package doesn't actually work cross-compiled, and this one does. There's just too many things that are environmental specific that we see when you're working with large groups of people. The dev container is a great way to share a single file within a Git repo that is an open standard that you could use GitHub, whatever their thing is called, code spaces. You can use DevPod, my preferred choice, which is just open source and can run anywhere. Gitpod is move to dev container as well.
Oh, really?
From Gitpod YAML. Yep. All of these tools basically are evolving around this one standard. Which is really nice. IntelliJ added support now, built-in support for dev containers. So it's really growing its adoption and its support in the ecosystem. And I think that it solves one of the major issues of, especially in enterprise companies. One of the biggest issues in enterprises is you don't have admin on your machine to install whatever you want. And running in a remote container in Kubernetes with dev containers solves that for me.
Yes, the last one is 100% true. But I think that for the enterprise, you cannot install stuff, right? I think that dev containers help a lot, but they're not the solution to the silly problem that the companies made. They're not the real solution, kind of I cannot develop something.
Are you going to fight? Right, but you also can't fight that. That's such an uphill battle. Right.
No, I agree. It's very helpful for that. It's just such a stupid problem. Kind of I cannot express how much I dislike saying you're a developer and get this, you're the developer who can do anything they want in production because you control code that is running in production. But you cannot install Git.
Exactly.
That does not compute. And I know that you cannot solve it. But
yeah. Exactly.
Okay, in local cluster, what is a good gateway API? I'm not sure whether he means gateway API or Ingress. Because I never use gateway API locally. I don't think.
I have Contour.
Yeah?
It works.
Okay,
yeah, just, again, expose the external ports on your whatever through the same kind config, just like you do for anything else when you want to do Ingress, when you do any of that. And it works. Contour is my favorite.
Yeah, but, that's the part where... So... If you're writing manifest for Contour, right, for gateway API, right, you're writing manifests. Yes, I think it's great. But if you're a developer and you need gateway API or something like that, you go remote or don't use it, because I get slightly annoyed and I'm not talking as a developer, I'm writing Node.js app, right? If I'm supposed to set up gazillion things locally, then I think that we should just go remote.
Exactly. Oh, I'm a huge supporter of vCluster in remote Kubernetes clusters, and that is, I think, the best development environments. It's better than kind. Have one cluster that you spin up vClusters on.
Depends. Here's what it depends on. Are you talking now about open source or commercial version?
Open source.
Okay. I think that that was not the case before, but actually a few days ago I saw it. Importing CRDs is now only commercial.
What?
And And they should earn money. Everybody should earn money. Just
Yeah.
I'm not.
I'm shocked though.
Yeah.
Okay.
And to me, that breaks completely the usage of vCluster, right? Because I precisely want vCluster so that I don't need to set up all the shenanigans everywhere. I don't want to run the same tools.
You don't want to run 30 crossplanes. You want to install
30
Crossplane in the
crossplanes,
core. And,
or 30 Argo CDs, or 30 whatever. It doesn't matter what it is, right? Yes. Google it. I'll go to the next question while you're Googling.
Yeah.
Following up on my question, we use OPA. I find Kyverno much more user-friendly. 100%
Yes.
agree. 100%. No, 170%. What added value?
2000%.
What added value does Kyverno provide over OPA? In other words, why would someone choose Kyverno, not OPA? I mean, I feel that Jonathan already answered part of the question. You said that you find Kyverno much more user-friendly, right? It's simply so much easier for me to read and write policies in Kyverno than, what's the language? My brain froze now.
Rego.
Than Rego. Yeah. It's simply, and it feels like, and this is very subjective, but it feels like it belongs in Kubernetes, while Gateway feels like that it belongs in Kubernetes just as much as Jenkins belongs in Kubernetes.
Yeah.
Now, what is a good thing about OPA, if you have if you don't want to mess with two different tools for policies, and you have non-Kubernetes policies for resources that are not managed by Kubernetes, then go for it.
Mm-hmm.
What's your opinion on DORA metrics? I stopped following DORA metrics. They became boring to me.
I support DORA metrics. I think that it's only a part of the puzzle, but I think that it is a large part of the puzzle. The question is, and this is always the challenge, DORA metrics is a great way to measure, whatever, developer efficiency or productivity or whatever we want. Like it is good at that, I think. The one issue is that typically what we see people trying to do is like, hey, we're implementing platform engineering. We're building an IDP right now. So we're going to implement DORA metrics to, measure the success of our platform. I'm like, that's great. But the issue is that you don't have DORA metrics today in your disaggregated, weird, like all do-it-yourself system. So how are you actually going to know the value that your platform brought if you aren't collecting DORA metrics previously as well? Right? That's not an issue of DORA metrics necessarily. That's an issue just overall of like, we always try to implement metrics based on like these new paradigms. But if you can't apply those metrics or get those metrics from the previous paradigms, how do you actually know that the new paradigm actually helped you?
The way I see it, actually, the main value of DORA, I agree with everything you said, but the main value of DORA metrics is that it talks business. You have very often in companies situations where you have a bunch of engineers going to business, trying to ask for the budget to improve something, to change something for better, and don't know how to articulate in a language that business understands. And business is time and money. And DORA gives you that information, gives you the information how much you can potentially save or earn if you do things in a way how more advanced teams are doing.
Yeah.
Pros and cons of GitHub Actions. And are you still watching vCluster, I bet?
No, I'm with
okay.
you. I just brought up the page, so it's in my history, so I go back and look at it after the show.
Pros and cons of GitHub Actions and Jenkins. You don't need to run
I know
anything.
pros of GitHub Actions. I don't know pros of Jenkins. I know cons of Jenkins, and I know cons of GitHub Actions.
So,
or
there is a pro of
Jenkins. It's open source.
Yeah,
Oh,
true.
Yeah, okay, great.
True. There is another one, which is a pro, but I don't consider it pro. You can do things in Jenkins you can do things at such a level of complexity in Jenkins that you cannot do in GitHub Actions.
I disagree.
Yeah?
You could do anything in GitHub Actions because you can do anything in a container. Shell out to whatever, run Python. You can run Groovy in a Java container and do the exact same level of cockamamie whatever in a GitHub action.
That's why I said that it's a pro of Jenkins, but I don't agree. What I was referring to now, think about it using exclusively Jenkins Groovy syntax to define everything. So you're talking about writing your own scripts or running, I don't know what. No, I'm talking about what you can do with Jenkins Groovy, you cannot do with GitHub Actions syntax alone.
Correct.
And you shouldn't.
Correct. And you shouldn't do that in Jenkins either. But that's all.
Yeah.
You should be using the declarative files of the Jenkins file declaratively.
Yeah.
But
both tools. So the summary of the way I think is that both tools should not contain any logic except orchestration. Execute this and then execute that and then execute this. Kind of all automation is outside those tools. Yeah. Right? And then it doesn't matter. And if that's the case, kind of like you want the most convenient solution, the way I see it. And most convenient solution is GitHub Actions, excluding the price. But I dare somebody to calculate the price of maintaining your own Jenkins compared to paying for it.
Hold on, and I disagree with that as well. And the reason that I'll completely disagree with you on pricing is because what we have to think is if you're talking pricing of GitHub Actions versus Jenkins, right? Jenkins, you're running Jenkins server and agents yourself, right? GitHub Actions on private repos also, if you do self-hosted agents, meaning you're still less than you would with Jenkins because I don't have Jenkins server. I just have my agents running. It is free forever. It doesn't matter how many. So just do self-hosted agents. Use the operator that's another like whatever open source project, but there's an open source project that brings up pods, basically ephemeral agents in Kubernetes, and you're done. Like it's much cheaper. It's much easier. It's actually free except for the hosting of the agents, which anyways with Jenkins you would be paying for. If it's public repos, it's free on GitHub as well.
I know another pro for Jenkins. I just came to me. You don't have pretty forms to fill in and trigger it yourself.
What, in GitHub Actions?
Yeah.
You do if you set the whatever. You can set the manual trigger for workflows.
Yeah, but does it give you a form kind of like with drop-down lists? Really?
It gives you a form. It's not pretty, but are you really going to tell me that Jenkins's UI is pretty?
No, but it's advanced. I'm joking with you. I'm messing with you, man. Kind of like I'm naming all the things that people do with Jenkins and they shouldn't be doing. That's the point.
Exactly.
Kind of like there are a bunch of things that Jenkins can do. GitHub Actions cannot do, and you
version. Here's another one. You can manage the version of a plugin that is going to break at the same time all of your application CI/CD at once. That's also a pro of Jenkins. I hope Darren doesn't watch this.
Darren, we love you. Effectively, containers are equivalent of plugins. Actually, are you a heavy user of GitHub Actions? How do you call it? Plugins? No, whatever they call it.
GitHub Actions. They're called actions.
Okay, yeah. Okay, there we go.
Yes, they're called actions.
Because I end up most of the time, I have maybe 3 actions that I use and the rest is just kind of run.
So I actually do use a lot of them. I use like, there are some nice ones out there. So like that definitely improve things. Yeah, I mean, I use them all the time.
You know, my rule. There you go. My rule is there are some things that I never run locally. And there are some things that I want to run both in pipelines and locally. And those things that run everywhere need to be a script. right? The command. And then I would put in GitHub Actions things like checkout, right? Kind of like, yeah, kind of. I'm not checking out every day locally.
Right. But like, how about like publishing of a container image?
Yeah, I use actions for that. That's very convenient. Actually,
Right.
I'm thinking probably 50-50. I have scripts that build and push essentially. So now when I think about in my brain, I'm going through the actions I have. Actually, no, not that much.
So I like Docker's ones are actually really good because Docker have them like set up in a really nice way for like auto versioning and for like integration with auto generation of attestations and SBOMs using like the features that exist in BuildX and whatnot. So you can actually, through their actions, like auto sign with cosign, auto generate the in toto attestations, get, whatever, which is just nice, right? So it just makes it easy. I don't need to write that myself, just like use their actions.
True, but I think in my case, it goes to the previous rule that I said. There are quite a few projects where I never push an image from my laptop. Kind of never. And then I use actions, right? There are cases where I wrap them in a script because for whatever reason, I would build, sign, and push local from my laptop as well. And then for me, it's convenient to have a script, and then I just run the same script.
Right.
Okay, from Adam. How does the process work for having render Helm manifests with Flux CD currently just installed using Helm release from an OCI repo or Helm repo with values in the Helm release? Any tools? I'm not sure I understood the question.
Yeah, me either. For having
because
rendered Helm.
If you render Helm manifests, that's usually
and
with
you're
the
using
intention.
a customization.
Customization or kube control apply, doesn't matter. Kind of like basically you're not applying, if you're rendering them, you're usually not applying them with Helm. So I'm not, if you can clarify, Adam.
Yeah.
We'll get back to you.
Yeah.
Oh, this is your alley. You're the Azure user more than me. How to rotate Azure DevOps path token when MFA has been introduced?
I have absolutely no clue. I do not use Azure DevOps.
There we go. You heard it, folks. We don't use it.
I apologize, but I try to stay away from that tool. I believe in the other Git solution from Microsoft called GitHub.
That was, by the way, probably one of the best purchases any software company ever made.
By far. Yeah.
And it probably does not translate into direct revenue, but it's the most beneficial purchase.
Genius. It changed the perception of Microsoft in such a good way. And the amount of data it gave them so they could train their AI models on it, very good for them.
While doing CD deployment in Kubernetes, how should we maintain different environment service account JSON variable securely? Mostly what I know is using a variable group, but still not much secure. Do you understand this one, Scott?
No, if the idea is having different, how do you deal with GitOps approaches with having different secrets and whatever in different environments?
There is a follow-up related to
secrets.
Says related to kubeconfig setup, context setup. So here's what I'm guessing that this is. That when it says CD, it doesn't mean like Argo CD or Flux. It means
okay.
Kube control
Jenkins,
apply.
GitHub Actions, whatever, right? Okay. Should we maintain different environment service account JSON variables securely? The answer is whatever security implementation exists within your provider. So if you're using GitHub Actions, then that's storing that within GitHub secrets, or using Vault and OIDC authentication and pulling it in from Vault. And Jenkins has Vault plugins and all of that it can pull in from Vault. It's just store in an external system and bring it in at, deployment time in memory.
Anthony, when using a managed Kubernetes solution like GKE with Crossplane, is it needed to use a backup solution like Velero?
Yes.
Even if the cloud... you were too fast for me. Yes, 100% yes. I mean, the follow-up was even if the cloud provider already take care of restoring in case of a problem. I don't trust them for that. So yes.
Yeah, neither do I. Yeah. And also, if you're backing up Crossplane managed resources, you will be paying $0.0001 maybe a year for the amount of storage that's going to take in an S3 bucket to store. It's just YAML files. It's nothing. Like, there is absolutely no reason not to run Velero to back up MRs. You're not backing up persistent data. It takes no time. It takes no resources. It's just...
And you're in control of what you're backing up and what you're, more importantly, what you're restoring, right?
Exactly.
Okay. Another one. I'm a fan of Crossplane, but does anyone run it for mission-critical production environments successfully and confidently? Does day 2 operations such as refactoring and migrations? This is going to be a unsatisfactory answer, but it's going to be, from my side, yes. But I'm never sure with whom I have NDA and with whom no, so I cannot say who.
And the answer is the same from my side.
There we go.
Yeah. There are.
So without, kind of, what I can say is that there are some massive companies that are using it. Now, if the question is whether there is just as many companies using it in production as Terraform, the answer is no, because it's much newer tool, blah, blah, blah. But massively big companies are using it, yes. Actually, I would even say that, and I might get punished for saying this, right? But Crossplane might not even give you much value in a smaller environment, right? Oh, I have a couple of, maybe 2 clusters, 3 servers, what's or not. It might be too much. So it's usually picked up by bigger organizations. Yeah. Workflow dispatch for manual trigger. That's probably comment on one of the previous questions, I'm guessing. Tell me, Wasim, if that's not the case.
Workflow dispatch, that's the name in GitHub Actions for manual triggering of a workflow.
Okay. And it gives you the form, kind of.
Yeah, it's an ugly form, but it's a form.
You see my dislike for forms that I haven't even checked it out. When adopting Kubernetes in an org that's new to it, what are your thoughts on implementing GitOps from the start? Or would you soft start with something else? I would probably adopt, GitOps would be probably one of the first tools to adopt, but my recommendation is usually start vanilla. Kind of like, just kind of figure out deployments and ingress and service.
So my general approach is that you always have GitOps in the shared environments, but what you do when you're starting in a new organization is you set up a dev cluster that is, we'll call it like POC, sandbox, whatever, where everyone just has kubectl access. And you basically, everyone learns there. But the second something is being deployed to a shared environment, let's say a staging already, or pre-prod, or a whatever, only GitOps, like from the beginning. Dev can be kubectl at the beginning to get used to things. Get stuff working, and then GitOps.
Oh, yeah, okay. So if you spend sufficient time... So without now saying whether it's production or pre-production or something, starting day 1 on GitOps might be tough simply because by executing kube control apply, you see what's happening, kind of. I mean, you see with GitOps as well, right? But it's easier to get into it.
You have pretty UI if you use Argo CD also.
Yeah, but it's somehow, I feel, easier to get a grasp of what's happening in Kubernetes.
It's much easier with kubectl. Yes.
Kube control, exactly. Now, so slight disagreement, but yeah, I would say second day put it there, or third, or something like that. Mm-hmm. Okay, Mate, the only pro of Jenkins to me was the plugin where when test failed, job indicator was yellow, but when script failed, it was red. So you could easily distinguish job results. Isn't that... GitHub Actions give you the different color as well. Just it's not yellow, but gray, right?
I don't know if you can set like what color based off of what phase.
Yeah, no, you cannot choose the color, but you see the different color when it failed.
Yes, but what he's saying is if it failed in the test or when it failed in the build or whatever, that it was different colors. Okay, yeah, okay, that's cute. You can build a UI around that. You could adapt the GitHub Actions plugin in Backstage and probably implement that in about 3 minutes. So, like, I wouldn't. Yeah.
Yeah, but still, if you compare one-to-one, yeah, there you go. Another pro. GitHub Actions also do not show complete logs when running. Is that really case? I don't recall.
I see the logs when it runs.
Yeah. It shows whole output. It does obfuscate some secrets. That's true.
Yeah.
If that's what you mean, but otherwise it shows.
Right. If what we mean by it doesn't show all the logs is that it doesn't show the logs that should never have been shown, yes, that's true. But it obfuscates the things that should be obfuscated, and it shows it. From my experience, it shows everything else. If there's something that it isn't, I would be very interested in knowing, because I just haven't run into that ever.
Another, we opened Pandora's box. GitHub Actions YAML isn't YAML compliance. I did not know that. Is that the case?
I don't think that it's necessarily the case. I think that you can do certain things there that they have laxed, like their validations of like you don't need to put certain things in quotes that I think YAML requires you to put in quotes. But I can't think of anything that would be anti-YAML in their syntax.
There we go.
And all I know is that the VS Code, like Red Hat's YAML, whatever plugin that everyone uses for YAML linting that complains in VS Code when your YAML is invalid, doesn't complain about my GitHub Actions. So, like, yeah, I would be surprised.
So Adam says, I try out render Helm manifest, but don't know how to set it up with Flux. That would be Flux customization, right?
Yeah, Flux customization. You just push it to an OCI artifact, push it to Git, push it to wherever, and then just use a customization with a Git source or OCI source.
So what I suspect that Adam might have faced the problem is by trying to render the manifest and then use, what is the name in Flux? Helm or Helm release or something like that.
Helm release.
Yeah. It's not anymore
Helm.
Helm.
Release is when I give it a Helm chart. The second you rendered it, it's not Helm, at which point you use the customization resource. And I am a big fan of the OCI support in Flux and storing stuff in OCI artifacts because it's versioned, it's a shippable artifact, it's, you're not just polluting Git history, things like that. So, yeah. I don't have any render in CI or whatever is like the initial part of render, shove it to an OCI artifact, and then deploy that OCI artifact to your cluster, which is just the manifests.
For Sofian, currently set up a Kubernetes cluster. I want to expose some applications on internet. I'm going with MetaLB and traffic. Any advice? I like traffic. Traffic is okay. No special advice from my side.
I'm a fan of KubeVip instead of MetalLB, but MetalLB is fine as well. If you're exposing it on the internet, the real question, again, is if I'm guessing this is self-hosted because otherwise you wouldn't be using MetalLB. So, my one recommendation, make sure it's secure because, probably by default it isn't. And you don't have all the WAF protections and whatnot that you get in public cloud. So make sure to enforce security. But beyond that, yeah, I'd recommend looking at KubeVip if you aren't locked into MetalLB because it's just better. But that's just my opinion.
From Swami, Google, Microsoft, AWS team up to develop Kube Resource Orchestrator or CRO. Any thoughts? I'm biased. So I'll leave thoughts to Scott. Otherwise, I might
My
sound
thought-
like...
My thoughts is I simply do not get it. I'm seeing everyone saying that Crow is going to replace Helm. A chicken is going to replace an apple. That's about what that analogy means to me. Like the client-side templating and package management tool against a controller in Kubernetes. I don't see the real relevance there. Between them, it's more of a competition to things like Crossplane, Kube, Vela, things of that, Kratix, like in that area.
Kratix, yeah.
And my general issue with Crow, it is much. I will say like this: if Crossplane was where it was a year and a half ago or so when functions came around, and you showed me Crossplane or what Crow is today, I would choose Crow, because for the simple use cases that Crossplane was able to solve without functions versus what Crow is able to solve today, they're basically at par with one another, and the syntax of Crow is much easier and it's much simpler to get started with than Crossplane was. However, what Crossplane understood very quickly, or not that quickly, but they understood after a few years, was that the patch and transformer, the staying within pure YAML, simply does not scale to what is actually needed at a production scale, where I need for loops, I need better conditionals, I need different, types of manipulations within my controllers. And for that, they implemented functions. I just see Crow as making the exact same mistakes that Crossplane made. The only difference is that Crossplane made them and they were the first in the industry to do what they were doing, really. So there was no previous art to learn from. I wish that Crow would learn from the previous art that exists out there. I am a huge supporter of not having one tool in an area and having multiple so that there is competition. I think that's a healthy thing and a good thing for the industry. And I was really excited when I saw Crow come out. It just makes zero sense to me, the implementation of it.
The real question I have, without giving the answer, is that I never understood which unsolved problem they're trying to solve. Whenever I see some new tool, my first thought is, okay, what is this solving that all other tools before it didn't solve, right? And I couldn't understand, really. Maybe that it's easier than Crossplane.
It's much easier than Crossplane, right?
Yeah.
Like that we can agree on, like 100% it's simpler. It's much easier to get started. You don't have when you want to just be deploying Kubernetes resources, right? Like the big difference, Crossplane, me and you, I think, agree, Victor, that compositions are the key part of Crossplane, not
I assume that
However,
everything you said so far is compositions.
Right. However, Crossplane as a whole is also the providers, and it's that whole ecosystem. Crow is just the composition part, right? It's just the composition XRD part, right? That's all it is. It's define an API and what that actually does, and then you could spin out provider managed resources of Crossplane, or it could be a deployment or an ingress. Now, what they got right that is going to be, it seems, made right also in Crossplane 2.0, according to the proposal at least, is the fact that today to deploy a deployment in Kubernetes, I need to wrap a deployment within an object, which is templated within a function, which is within a composition, and you start the A of API version when you're generating that 8 spaces in of the thing, and like the amount of nesting that I have to do in Crossplane today can be a bit much for people. That is getting better with Crossplane 2.0, at which point I think there will be no almost like benefits to Crow. It also has the benefit right now that it's namespace scoped resources also.
That's also 2.0.
But that's also 2.0, exactly. So, for the next 3 months, Crow, if they want to gain a user base, I'd say for the next 3 months, push it really hard, or however long it's going to take for 2.0. But, once 2.0 comes out, I don't see
knock on wood, 3 weeks. Okay. How do you monitor mostly static data? Let's say versions of packages of your app. It feels bad to put them in time series DB, but you also want the information next to other metrics for troubleshooting. I mean, your versions are part of usually what you're importing in metrics, right?
Yeah,
I mean, depends actually on labels.
Like labels on your metrics.
Yeah.
Add that as labels into your metrics.
Exactly. There you go. Labels. I want to try out render Helm charts with Flux CD, but okay, this is we already covered this. What is the best way to run Apache Spark in Kubernetes? Does it add value to run Apache Spark in Kubernetes? I'm not using Spark. I'm not sure you, Scott.
Yes, it has value. Yes, there is a best practice that adds you to the Spark operator. Use the Spark operator and have a much better life than trying to use the old-fashioned Kubernetes implementation. But use the Spark operator and it's great.
Okay, so Crossplane feels much more complicated and opinionated than SEK, ASO, KCC. Why would one choose Crossplane over the official controllers from AWS, GCP, Azure? Now, unlike the previous question, now we're jumping into providers, not Crossplane. Just to be sure, because you can use Crossplane providers with CRO. You can use ACK with Crossplane compositions, ignoring now the wrapping around objects, right? So you can use all those that you mentioned in Crossplane, just to be completely transparent and clear. Nothing prevents you from that. The biggest one is that Crossplane providers are complete. You will find all, I don't know whether something changed recently, so somebody correct me, or maybe you know, but those from Google, AWS, and Azure are only a fraction of their endpoints at this stage, first of all, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Crossplane has some built-in mechanism that's specific to Crossplane that unify how you manage secrets, how you do certain things. But yeah, you're completely free to use ACK with... Yeah. And this is, I think that the biggest mistake, let's say, that we people in Crossplane made is that never made it clear really that compositions and providers are two completely separate things, right?
Yep.
You can use one without the other. You can use one in some other tool. I have cases that I've been using. You remember, Scott, you mentioned the YAML before from compositions? Mm-hmm. Well, I was using, back then, I had cases when I was using resources for Crossplane providers in Kube Vela.
Right. Why not?
Yeah.
Exactly. So, like, in general, I would say on this one also, beyond, like, I completely agree with everything you said, right? Like, ACK, ASO, KCC are not full, mirrorings of the APIs and all of that. I think the other thing is the consistency. And what I mean by consistency is not just consistency within the provider, it's consistency between providers. ACK, ASO, KCC, very different schemas. Right? Every cloud is different. And of course, the values are going to be different in between a S3 bucket or a Google Cloud bucket or an Azure bucket, right? But the general, how I pull in secrets, how I save secrets, how I deal with all of that is always the same. And the other thing is, I don't care if you are a company that runs only in AWS, you don't only need infrastructure as code for AWS. You also need infrastructure as code for New Relic or Datadog or Grafana or Prometheus or GitHub or any of the 25 million other tools that do not come from AWS that are in your environment. Same thing for Azure, same thing for Google. And the second that you are within the Crossplane space, any other provider that you add is going to have the same user experience that you learn from the core one, which would be probably in most cases AWS, Google, or Azure. So the fact that I get a unified experience for all of them, yes, the learning curve to understanding how a provider or the UX of a MR, like a managed resource in Crossplane, may not be as great as an ACK resource, let's say, which is debatable, but let's say even that that's true. I think the standardization across all providers is what's going to bring you the value.
that's the thing. You might need more time to figure out the first or second or third resource. But the moment you reach the fifth, actually, you'll be faster because of that standardization, right? I mean, as you said, the fields are different, S3 bucket, but everything else, because there's more than those fields, is unified, or at least tries to be unified, right? This reminds me of a question. I'm not getting that anymore, but I was getting it in the past a lot. Why use Terraform if there is CloudFormation?
Right.
Okay. Your opinions on Kubestronaut and Golden Kubestronaut. I don't know what is it. Certification, right? I don't know what it is.
I don't know.
We don't know.
I don't know. I like astronauts and I like Kubernetes. So if it has to do something with both, I'm cool. Like, yay.
You must like gold as well.
Yes, I like gold.
There we go. I want 5 of those. 5 of each.
Exactly.
Is it worth migrating already existing Terraform resources into Crossplane? How smooth will the migration be? Again, I'm biased, so I will give very quick answers. Yes to the first questions. I think that... No, okay. I'm going to rewrite that question. Is it worth migrating all the existing Terraform resources into Kubernetes, so that Kubernetes manages your resources that are sometimes outside Kubernetes? 100% yes, right? I could put here in this story, and I would give the same answer for the same reasons, the cluster API.
Yeah.
Right? And how smooth will the migration be? Not necessarily smooth. Because
it
it's
really
depends.
Yeah.
Huh?
The answer is it depends.
So I think I'm going to put a different question, right? How smooth is a migration from something to Kubernetes, right? And then the answer is it depends. You can lift and shift easily. So you can put your Terraform modules into Terraform provider of Crossplane and be done in no time. But you will not get the real benefits, right?
You'll get some of them. You get
some of them.
But not most.
You get some benefits, but it's not. You're not getting the full menu, right? Same thing with lifting and shifting. Can you lift and shift application to Kubernetes? Yeah, you can. There were a bunch of tools. Probably there are still. Do you get all the benefits from running WebSphere in Kubernetes? No. Crossplane day 2. I find it annoying I don't have the equivalent of Terraform plan. Probably relying more on automated testing helps, but I still be worried about rolling out refactored compositions. So there is something that coming. I'm not sure whether it will be commercial or open source, full disclosure, that some people might call similar to Terraform plan. I don't think it will be like Terraform plan, to be clear, because I'm not sure that it can be like Terraform plan. And the reason why I'm saying that is because Terraform, when you run Terraform, right, it executes things in certain order, which is a separate problem to speak about, and it executes it once, and so on and so forth, and it tells you what it will do. There will be tools that will put Crossplane closer to Terraform plan, but I don't think that it will ever get there because it's all about eventual consistency, right?
Right.
Things
Until
will happen.
Huh? Until and if Crossplane has a DAG, right? By the way, let's ask you, do you remember what the acronym DAG means?
I forgot already. I already forgot.
But yes, until it has a DAG, then so it builds that dependency tree ahead of time, which is the antithesis of what Crossplane is. Unless it had that, it can't do exactly what plan does.
So we had a discussion, quite a few discussions about DAG, and some sort of DAG might come, but not as exclusive and not for the same reasons like DAG in Terraform, right? We might get some kind of DAG that will speed things up, kind of, oh, I know that I should fire next iteration of reconciliation of this when this is done,
right?
So that you don't wait for a minute until reconciliation of that resource comes.
Right.
But I will be, and I will say this publicly, I will be opposed in anybody implementing DAG as a replacement for eventual consistency.
Right.
It's bad. It's just kind of, I'm fully on eventual consistency. It solves so many problems that we have with DAG, because no tool can ever calculate DAG for something as complex as managing infrastructure.
Yeah.
And I'm going to die on that hill if needed. This is comment rather than question. Good luck doing anything Backstage in 3 minutes. I mean, if you spend 1,000 minutes or hours working with it, you can do things in 3 minutes.
Yeah. If you have Claude 3.5 Sonnet, you can do things in 3 minutes. It takes more than that to compile and start the application, but like that's a whole other thing. Thank you, Node.js.
Which do you prefer using, GH, GitHub CLI, or Git CLI? I use both.
Git CLI when it exists there, and GH CLI when it's something that's GitHub specific that I can't do with Git.
We're on the same page. I love it. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I use it for PRs. I use it for watching GitHub Actions. I use it for a bunch of things. But yeah, I don't even know whether GitHub CLI has all or common Git commands. I'm not even sure whether it has add, commit, push. That's how much I was interested in those things. Okay, when starting a new cluster. Oh, we are over the time already. We have so many questions left. I'm sorry, folks. We will not answer all your questions today. I will write them down for the next week. And next week, I'm not sure yet. Next week, either we will not have the show or we will have the show only with me. We'll see. Anyway, I'll write it the question. Whenever the next show is, I'll put them back. Thank you so much for coming. Keep them coming. See you in the next one. Cheers.
See you, everyone.